Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jaybe show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. Come on in, sit on down. I hope you guys got yourself something to drink, maybe a little bit of a snack. We're going to have a conversation today. Just to let you guys know, the Jaybe show is every single Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys have an easy Sunday morning, then go ahead and have a seat and let's have a conversation. Also, just to let you guys know, if you have not already, go ahead and give the stream a like. This helps us out within the tube space. So thank you so very much for that. Now, if you guys would like to, you guys can go to our Substack. You can get put on our email list so that you guys can get whenever we upload clips or have any live streams, you guys get the notifications for that. You guys can just go to revolutionaryblackout.substack.com. And then also, if you have any questions or if you have anything that you would like to bring up to us as far as any stories or just any inquiries, period, then you guys can go to revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com for that too. So what are we going to be talking about today? I want to say a blanket hello to everybody because I do have a guest and I want to respect their time as much as possible. We're going to be talking about a couple of things. Well, one of the things we're going to be talking about later in the show is the Brightline Workers Union. So Brightline, which is a high-speed rail or a light rail, depending on how you look at it, in Florida, the workers are trying to unionize. So we're going to talk about that. Also, later in the show today, we're going to be talking about Free Khaliifah Williams. This is going to be a very all-hands-on-deck segment, because we're going to need everybody to stick around and listen to this one because this is so important. And I think when it comes to, stories like this, a lot of independent media isn't bringing this to attention. So we have to talk about it. But for right now, we're going to be talking about many things, Black Marxism. We're going to be talking about the diaspora, quote unquote wars. And we're going to be talking about Kamala Harris with Shaquille Sunflower. He is an activist, and also he is with the All African People's Socialist Party. Joining me right now, Shaquille Sunflower. So good to have you on Revolutionary Blackout Network.
Peace, and love, everybody. Appreciate y'all tuning in. So again, my name is Shaquille Sunflower. I am part of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Without them, there is no me. Also, without my community, my home community, Woodside Houses, which is based in Queens, there is no me. So shout out to Woodside, of course.
Great. Lovely to have you. Now, I just have a few questions that we can start off with. One of my first questions, as you are a self-identified Marxist, right? One of the things that I wanted to ask you is how do you respond to people who, especially particularly Black and brown people, who say that Marx was just a white European man that doesn't understand the issues and systems in the global South? What do you say to people who espouse that?
I mean, I work out of the framework of Marxism by way of Pan-Africanism. So that's more scientific socialist aspect of it. And I would ask them, that's the system that brings us closer to us being a whole human. Look at what we've been stuck with for centuries, be it Black, be it brown, be it red originally, right? You got land dispossession, you got exploitation of labor, you have stolen resources. Under capitalism, I would say, right? The capitalism, by definition, is to remove the worker from its work, from its labor, from its value. When you devalue the worker, when you dehumanize the worker, that in a nutshell, and you leave, the profits in the hands of somebody that didn't actually do the work. We all understand how much of a nuisance that is on a micro level. Look at it this way, and going to school and you do school projects, you got that one person that didn't do anything for the group project, but they are benefiting from it. Look at the CEOs in your company. Look at the owners of your company. Capitalism is a concentration of wealth into the hands of the very few, while leaving the many just scrambling for whatever crumbs get left. And people look at it and they're like, oh, well, such and such got this million or such and such. trust me, trust and believe they're still getting exploited too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there is no such thing, as per Kwame Ture, there is no such thing as Black capitalism. We have to get away from that. There's no such thing as brown capitalism. There's no such thing as red capitalism, simply because we do not own the means of production. If you don't own the means of production, by its very definition, you can't be a capitalist. You could be aspiring capitalist, but then at that point, it's an exercise of futility, because why would you be working against your own interests? Or why would why would that be a situation in which, all right, cool, if I know that capitalism is exploitative, if I know that capitalism is murderous, if I know that capitalism is the reason why we are in this hell that we're living in now, particularly African people, particularly Native Americans, then why would I continue on with that same system? The same thing that got us into the madness is not going to get us out of it. That's foolish. That's, to even think that it would get you out of it as well.
It kind of makes me think of a statement I made 2 months ago, and some people would scoff at me and probably tell me that I'm a jerk for saying this, but I said this, and I'm stand by it. I'm standing 10 toes down. I said, no educated, self-respecting Black person would ever support capitalism.
No, I wouldn't.
Because it is the reason why we were brought here in the first place, right?
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject at that point, man. I'm like rambling at this point. When you kidnap people, when you have them till and toe and build nation off of their blood and sweat, when you literally rip them from their families, much like we're seeing Israel do to Palestine now, then, at what point, where is the racial self-esteem, I think I would ask at that point? If you know that your people were held in bondage, if you know that your people were murdered, if you know that and this, people fought on the way there, people jumped off the boat so that they wouldn't have to be enslaved.
Yes.
But if you know that for the sole purpose of building shit up for somebody else, your labor's being exploited, you being murdered, there is sexual abuse of the highest order. I'm not going to say the R word on here in regard to it. There is the emasculation of Black men. There is, look at it this way. Yeah, we're not held in bondage, but if you go and look at the 13th Amendment, because the country likes to throw around Constitution as supreme law of the land, or if you go, with the exception of imprisonment. Now look at the prison system. Now look at where we are at in Black August. Rest in peace to Comrade George Jackson, who would, by all means, should still be here, because who the hell gets a 1 to life indeterminate sentence at 17 years old? Meanwhile, you've got 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse with military arms, with purpose, walking around this motherfucker like, he's free, but we lose George Jackson. He's free, but Trayvon Martin is gone. He's free, but Mike Brown is gone. You cannot, particularly within the landscape of the United States, racism is not, it can't be separated from capitalism. If it was built on it, how would you go ahead and extract it from it? The whole foundation of this shit is genocide against the natives that were already here. And that's one of the first history lessons we get. Right around the time when I was a kid, and I came home with like my first little history report for like Columbus Day or some nonsense like that. My mother, she told me I had to do the work, and then looked me dead in my face and told me this was bullshit. How could you discover something that already existed, as if people didn't have civilization, as if people didn't have society, as if people didn't have a way of life? So to be a Black capitalist or a Black aspiring capitalist, and you see this more, more prevalent with like your celebrity class.
Oh yeah.
And you see this more prevalent with those professors that are higher up, that, okay, so I'm not going to really say what it is because I don't want to lose tenure or whatever personal gain I'm going to get from it.
That's true too.
So there are very few reasons. There's no reasons for you to even consider it. Whereas under socialism, everybody has what they need according to their ability to be able to do the work. And then you're also not leaving other people out in the cold. how could you, you know, being from New York, one of the things I've seen, because New York is like the capitalist epicenter of the United States. One of the things I would see, you know, on a regular basis, on a daily basis, is the amount of unhoused people. There shouldn't be people that have to sleep in the train station. There shouldn't be people that have to sleep on a bench when it's 15 degrees outside in the dead of winter in New York.
Yeah.
These were things where even if I didn't have the language, I knew they were wrong. Even in New York, where you got like a cold blue, where you have to find housing for people that are unhoused because of the extreme weather conditions they'd be faced with.
Yeah.
And now we turn it into, how can we commodify the unhoused? How? By ripping down encampments, sending them into prison, having them do labor for nothing at all, depending on whether or not they have a prior record prior to, you know, current situation.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that and keeping this in the perspective of Black people, especially Black people in the United States, you know how a lot of us, we have this disdain for how we're characterized in media, how we're characterized by, you know, through whiteness. And we see how the hoods are set up, how, you know, we talk about gang violence, we talk about drug trade, things like this happen in the streets, right? When you look at it fundamentally, it is really just a microcosm of the capitalist system that we are imitating in the streets. Because look, you got the thugs on the corner that are making sure that their hood is, you know, clear of any type of opposition, police. You have the people who are mid-level that, you know, that try to keep the dudes that stand on the corner to sell the product. I have to be very careful what I say. That sell the product to make sure they keep them in line. You have the middle managers. Then you have the people at the top that are extracting all the resources from the people who are actually making the sales on the corners. You got the capitalists, right? And anybody who steps out of line is a victim of that gang or the state. So really, when you look at it, it is really just a microcosm of bringing capitalism into our hoods. And so this is why I love one of my RBN members, Rome, because he's a former gangbanger that turned communist, because he realized that the capitalist system is really just a big ass mafia gang, whatever you want to call it, that is actually exploiting the people and heavily upon us. So when people talk about, oh my God, I hate the gang violence, then this is why when we say things like defund the police on the way to abolition, that's really about defunding a gang on the way to abolishing a gang, right? But the thing is, a lot of people don't think about it like that because they don't connect the dots. And this is why I said, you know, and some people may disagree with me with this, but I say no educated, self-respecting Black person would ever support a system that has exploited us and subjected us, as well as our brown brethren as well. Like, why are we going to subject ourselves to that? And so when people talk about Marx being, oh, he was just some white guy, I love the way Kwame Ture said it, that Newton discovered Newton's law, that they call it. He just discovered, you know, that, you know, how gravity falls. But you can go anywhere in the world and somebody else probably also discovered that too. But did they record it down? Maybe, maybe not. But the most famous one that we know is of Newton. So therefore, that's why we call it Newton's law. Marxism is just putting a name to something discovered that most likely a lot of different indigenous cultures, both African and American indigenous, have discovered years ago. And then they were going to the opposite direction of more of a egalitarian system. This is why their systems work so much better for the whole of the entirety of their people rather than just a small few. And so this is why I talk about, like, yeah, you can, you know, talk about how Marxism was a white man, but the thing is that we need to focus on the message, not the messenger, you know? So
what I would usually refer to as that, and Walter Rodney talks about this in Decolonial Marxism, What I would
Mm-hmm.
state is, if you're talking about Marxism being a like a white ideology, but mimicking capitalism, which is inherently European, it's a
Oh,
faulty argument. You can't build shit on a weak foundation. If we understand, like, we look at the problem is people look at what is instead of looking at how it became. I'm a
okay.
simple person, so I look at the cause and the effect of shit, right? Okay, we here right now, but how did we get here? How did we arrive here?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in certain pockets too, it becomes irresponsible, particularly when you have like certain scholars that are liberal. No disrespect to their work, but like, if you had people convinced that this shit started in 1619 instead of it starts deeper than that and it's bigger than that, you're sending a mixed message to the masses. That's wholly irresponsible, because it's like, better, but you chose otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's my fault.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just, there should be no cheering for like black capitalism. Even when you look, I think it was Jay-Z said some stupid shit like capitalism is a calling black capitalists is like a slur or whatever. I think it's like a few months ago. I might be paraphrasing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, and take hold, for example, right? How do you go from being on a block where news cameras don't necessarily know what's going on in your hood, cough up a lung where I'm from, Marcy, son, to, okay, well, I'm now an aspiring black capitalist because I built this off of the exploitation of my own people. Even when you look at like the structure of gangs itself, I got homies that's gang affiliated. I've always been a nerd in the crew, and I'm proud of that. Whenever my boys would be like, "Yo, we getting ready to go do this," all right, cool. I'm gonna go to the library because I gotta finish this. There's nothing wrong with that. Get in where you fit in, but let's not act like the gangs just sprouted out of nowhere. Where did this come from? Where were the resources for these brothers and sisters? Where was the handout? If anything, I survived because of OGs that was in gangs or that was wrapped up in street life. It was always a pass for me walking through the hood. It's like, go to school, shorty, because they saw something in me that I didn't understand in myself at that point. So they have the capacity. It's just society already shitted on them. So it's like you feel defeated somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times they'll also see people like us, and they'll look out for us.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, nah, don't mess with him. He's good people. And they realize that, because you're not the type of person that wants to exploit and take control and harm other people. So even in the hood life, they realize that, and I think it's up to us to let them know that they were lied to by a system, and that that we can actually transform things, not just in a small way in our own hoods, but also more larger, nationwide. The thing is like, the capitalists bank on them not knowing, and so gosh, there's so much I can talk more about this, because this is a very deep subject that I think that a lot of people need to listen to, because a lot of times we're constantly faked into, we need to just do what these capitalists do in order to make it, when in reality we will never make it if we continue down their same road, because it is an unequal road. So yeah. So yes, thank you very much for that. I want to switch gears just a little bit into my next question. So as far as reparations for American descendants of slaves, do you agree with reparations?
I agree that reparations need to go to the diaspora as a whole.
Okay. All right.
Like, I don't think that it should be, okay, well, the people that were here, because you have to take into account, now we've gone from a question of victimized victims of capitalism to victims of imperialism as a whole.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, when you steal resources, including, the original resource would be manpower, right? So it'd be the
Mm-hmm.
labor that's there. So when you take these people that are doctors, that are attorneys, that are healers, and remove them from the society in which they're in, and we see this in real time with what Israel is doing and has been doing since 1947
Yeah.
to Palestine, just to kind of tie the parallel in there. And look at the first people that they chopped down. They blowing up hospitals, they blowing up schools, doctors, teachers, journalists, so the people that are entrusted with healing, the people that are entrusted with teaching, the people that are entrusted with delivering the news objectively are the ones that are being taken out by and large. Everybody else is, unfortunately, it's collateral damage. It's a casualty, but it's the same thing that's happening to people here. It's the same thing that's happening to our people and on the continent. When you look even, at the child poverty rate in the U.S., look at where Black children reside at within that spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's 16% or something like that. Black children living in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
How could you, feel value in yourself when you constantly looking in, or you're, living in a society that doesn't value you? Which is why we need unity, so the people that do know better can do better by the ones that don't necessarily have it all together.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have more of we are a collective. It has to be more collectivism than individualism.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense, that answers the question.
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking is because from a Marxist perspective, if you could make an argument for reparations just from purely a Marxist perspective, can you kind of square that circle for us?
Yeah, I got you. So as far as the Marxist perspective of it, if we know that Marxism is the way to making sure that you get what's owed to you for your labor, and we go back to the continent and kind of just bringing it back, the labor was stolen and the labor was not paid for. At this point, you can't even put a dollar amount on what's owed to Africans that was stolen from the continent and put here in order to be exploited for their labor to build what is now the United States.
Sure.
If I could put that, that's as simple as I believe I can put it. My apologies if I can't kind of break it down a little bit more than that, but that's the best or simplest track that I can see for it. If you know that capitalism requires exploitation, if you know that capitalism requires theft of labor, profit, of course, is the chief motive, but profit is wage theft.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing is more often than not built on lies. Everything is designed to capitulate to this one thing, and it thingifies the people. And instead of you being a person, you get relegated to property. No more relegated to property than if you look at it this way, right? If we can understand that during the Holocaust, one of the things that was done to the Jewish people with the hands of the Germans was numbers were placed on them. So they were thingified. They were no longer human. They were placed with numbers. Look at the records that got erased from Africans before they got kidnapped. Look at the stealing of them to the point where people don't have birthdays. Could you imagine it not having a birthday? Could you imagine not knowing how old you are? It needs to, and even, looking at it in the US, look at what happens with mass incarceration. Going back to the thing I said about the Holocaust, mass incarceration, they slap a number on you. You got to identify with that number instead of identifying with the human being. And then they slap a label on it and call it reformism, some level of reform, which we know is nonsense. How could you reform that when it's an extension of and not something that deviates away from? It's the same shit with policing. It's the same thing with militarization. You got United States alone, you spending trillions more, exponentially more on military than you are on public education. This is done deliberately. You could go on the US government website and look at what the military expenditures are versus what the public education expenditures are.
Yeah. One of the things that I always say is that if capitalism really is just a small few people who are using labor and exploiting them and taking in their surplus value, then that surplus value must be returned to the workers. Mm-hmm. And if the workers have died, then that surplus value must be returned back to their descendants. Meaning that reparations is actually pretty Marxist in its merits. So
of course it is, because it's a redistribution of wealth at the apex of it, right? It's a redistribution of land or redistribution of resources that belong to the people that tilled and told and worked for it. That's ultimately. God, I'm sorry.
I just think reparations is just another. It's a means of repair. I mean, the root word is repair, but it's also back pay. If you want to think about it like that, because honestly, ultimately, when you look at any type of lawsuit for restitution of damages, that's basically what reparations partially is. It's a restitution of damages that were done to the people. That could be restitution of damages done by American descendants of slavery. That can be restitution of damages done by, let's say, the Jamaican people, who need reparations back from England. It can be restitution from the Black people in Brazil, by the government of Portugal. So it's just really a restitution of damages. And if you believe in restitution from damages, then you essentially believe in reparations. But the question is, a lot of times you got some people who just don't believe in reparations at all, but yet they're okay with people suing for damages. And it's weird to me.
It's the inherent contradiction that lives within this space and place.
Well, that's true.
Like that's kind of what it comes down to. But I totally agree with everything you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So another question I have is, what do you say to the American Black people, those who identify as ADOS, those who identify as FBA, who resist uniting with Black people internationally because they think there's hate for us from these groups throughout the diaspora?
I'm pragmatic. I believe in just kind of looking at things from a cause and effect place. How do you become an American descendant of slavery without slavery having existed, and where did the slaves come from? So again, that's a faulty foundation to be like, I'm an American descendant of. Okay, but then you have to go down the line and acknowledge the fact that, okay, if your ancestors were slaves, where were they at prior to slavery?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with foundational. It's like, I think that part of the problem we have is people take words and try to bend them to their whim. You literally cannot have dissension from something if you don't acknowledge where it came from. If you don't acknowledge that slavery came from kidnapping Africans from the continent and bringing them forward to the United States, or to Jamaica, or to any other part of the Caribbean, to Brazil, to Puerto Rico, so on and so forth. As far as FBA, again, the key word in there being foundational. Where does this foundation derive from?
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe things have to be evidence-based. So if you can't produce the evidence that says that your foundation is here in the United States, which there's no African person, and they're saying, that would be a sane African person that would believe that they started here, even invoking Kwame Ture, much like we did earlier. What's in a name? Where did we come from? They slap these labels on us. This divide is problematic for the movement as a whole.
Yeah.
And I'm quiet. You've probably seen me on social. I don't really go back and forth with too many people, but it's like, I'm not gonna go back and forth the moment that I see that you're being illogical deliberately. And then it's also a situation in which I'm trying to figure out the wording for it. Like, you're being illogical deliberately, but then you're also like just pissing on people just for your personal gain. So you're mimicking the very thing that has you in the position that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Mm. One of the things I think of as somebody who is, by the label an American descendant of slave, I feel like there should be a solidarity between all of us, and also recognizing the particular crimes that were done to each one of us. Like, for instance, I do support reparations for those of us who are American descendants of slaves, but I also think that everybody who is a descendant of someone in the imperial core or the West should also lay claims to reparations to the respective governments, like for instance, England, Italy, France, and what have you, right? And because of that solidarity, I stand with them in that, but I would want them to stand with me when I made the claim of reparations for the lineage that I come from as well. And I think that there has to be a solidarity, and we have to not allow this white supremacist system to tell us who we are to our cousins and brothers and sisters and siblings, right? And the thing is, I think the problem is a lot of times we allow this white supremacist system to tell us, see, they don't like y'all. And then we believe it. And my pushback to some, especially some who are American descendants of slavery or Black Americans, is that a lot of times they'll say, well, a lot of these people who are immigrants, they're anti-Black. And it's like, are we going to paint all of them with a broad brush? Like, nah, I don't think we should paint them all with a broad brush, because we don't like to be painted with a broad brush. I do think that, unfortunately, because of white supremacy, some of the people who come here believe it, but it's more of the people who, I'm going to person my words very carefully, but it's more of the people who come legally that are anti-Black than the ones who come illegally. The reason being is because the ones who come legally are the ones who are on the upper ladders of this system in their respective countries. And those are the ones that are chosen to be allowed to come here. But then the ones who actually will have more solidarity with us, they're not necessarily allowed to come here. And then when they're forced to come here because of our foreign policy, they come, some of them are lied to about us. And some of them will believe the lie. Hell, some people who look like you and me believe the lie, who have family that's been here for generations. And so my thing is, it's like there needs to be a solidarity among us. And then we need to stop believing the lies that are told to us about Black people that are not, descendants of American slavery. And then the people who are immigrants that are Black need to stop believing the lies that the white supremacist system here that tells them about us. And so I think this is what needs to happen. There needs to be a coalescing of us just coming together and recognizing the certain crimes that were done in particular to each other, but at the same time, also having that solidarity and saying, hey, they screwed you over too. We're going to stand with you. And then they go, hey, we were screwed over. You're going to stand with us. And so I think that's what just needs to happen. And I'm tired of these diaspora wars that are constantly, coming over, because I'm constantly seeing on Twitter, oh, this person from Nigeria said this about foundational Black Americans. I'm like, that's one person from Nigeria. And truth be told, if you were to go over to Nigeria, Niger, Cote d'Ivoire, or Ethiopia, a lot of times they'll welcome you with open arms. They'll be like, hey, you're one of us. Come back. We love you. And the thing is that they don't want people to realize that love still exists.
The way that I see it, right, and kind of just your explanation of it, it's a breakdown in methodology. It's basically what it boils down to. And we've seen this historically too, even within the enslaved. When you look at like Frederick Douglass and the rift that he had with like Henry Bibb over giving the enslaved a Bible without giving them a dictionary. He was calling it a spelling book, though. If you look at it that way, the argument was, why would you give somebody something without giving them the means to be able to accomplish the end goal? You can't read without comprehension. So if you're just looking at words on a page and you don't understand what it is that they mean, we should probably think about this a little bit differently. But I think the way and the fashion in which we handle each other is colonial holdover. Everything is, even with the Nigeria, with people that may migrate from the continent and come over here and have that particular thought pattern. Okay, where is this thought pattern coming from? Why is it like this? Whose news are we getting? What accounts are we taking into account? Kind of thing. Like, I'm not here to war with ADOS or FBA, but yeah, I think there needs to be a meeting at the round table, because if the enemy itself is a common one, right? So it's the same type of, okay, cool. We need to figure out how we collectively move in this direction.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to move on. There's one question that I do want to bring attention to. Our viewer, Roger Meadows, asked, should ADOS and non-ADOS and be in the same reparations claim? What is your thoughts on that?
I think it's something that, if we're looking at it that way, it has to be co-authored. If you're looking at the fact that, we have to look at the fact that what we're up against, the enemy is going to co-author the policy that determines how we move. If we're looking at the enemy within the superstructure that we're in now, which would be the US, right? Republicans and Democrats the same. They're going to co-author the things that govern our daily lives. Mm-hmm. We have to say, okay, well, this is what we need. Even if we disagree within the disagreements and stuff, we have to come towards a compromise. As long as there's this rift between different factions, we're gonna be stuck in the same shit we in.
Okay. All right.
Here's the thing. Nobody's gonna get everything, and trying to accomplish more for this part versus that part, you're gonna end up losing everything in the process. Why do you think the process itself is stagnant? You have FBA, you have ADOS, you have Pan-Africans, you have these different ideologies, I would not call them, and the disagreement part of it is something that needs to be talked about versus the back and forth that I often see on social media.
Yeah.
Because let's be real about it. Me as the Pan-Africanist, or somebody that's ADOS, or somebody that's FBA, if we get pulled over by the police, you think they're trying to hear that shit? They don't care what you rocking with at that point.
Yeah.
And that's at the hands of the state.
Of course, but we're talking about the repair from things like slavery, Jim Crow, Black codes, redlining, things like that, which is disproportionately people who are American descendants of slaves that were affected. And so the reparations would be paid to the people who are based on lineage to those groups. And so that's, I think, the argument that's being made is that, if it's lineage based, then there are going to be people who are Black in this country that would not receive those type of payments, that restitution, because yes, when it comes to how they're treated post the civil rights movement, yes, they have a claim to that, but that's not the claim that's being made for reparations right now. And so I think that, that it's a valid claim, to push for reparations for that group. But also when it comes to racial justice, that's also another claim that should be pursued in addition to reparations as well. And I think the racial justice would include all Black people throughout the diaspora who are living in the United States as well. So I think it's kind of, I think that's kind of where it gets lost a little bit, is that people, and legally it could be made based on lineage, because if it's based on race, then it would not pass in court because it would be seen as discriminatory. But if it's based on lineage, then it could make a claim in court. So,
which is basing it on race and it being thrown out in court for being discriminatory is one of those inherent contradictions, I always say, because they do everything else on the basis of, particularly when they do the rulings and shit like that. So everything else is kind of on the basis of.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Well, that's the conversation that'll be ongoing. So let me continue on to my next question. So we're going to shift in gears here to Kamala Harris is now the presumptive Democratic nominee. Now she chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. Now, as we can see, Kamala Harris is now talking about the immigration issue. She's talking about how she is now tough on crime. I directed you to this ad the other day, and I just wanted to go over this ad really quick and some of her comments recently regarding the immigration issue as well. I have to say, this is hilarious coming from someone who ultimately it seems to be hypocritical on both sides of the issue. So let's just go into it.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
First of all, I would like to get your comments on that ad.
I find it funny for some of the same reasons you do, right? Like, she's the child of immigrants, or people that immigrated to the U.S. Mm-hmm. And her stance on it is one of it parallels Clarence Thomas. If you look at like his judicial rulings against Black folks, particularly poor Black folks, it's always been against the interest of. And he grew up dirt poor in a shack where he had to use an outhouse in order to go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Kamala Harris's stance is equal to Trump's, but the language that she's using is different because she has the background to be able to manipulate the language, which is what she's doing in this commercial. As somebody that was a poli-sci student in her undergrad, as somebody that went to become an attorney, one thing you're going to do a lot of is reading and writing. So to stand up there, she oftentimes talks in circles. It's the same thing that the Republicans themselves, that the conservatives are proposing. If anything, it might be worse because what the prevalent messages here is that she's going to be harder than they were on people that are attempting to migrate into the U.S. Mm-hmm. Is basically what I pull away from that.
Yeah, let me share this as well, because she decided to speak on it while she was also at a rally. And after this, then I will read the caption in the tweet. So here's Kamala Harris once again.
So I know what I'm talking about. We know our immigration system is broken, and we know what it takes to fix it. Comprehensive reform that includes strong border security and an earned pathway to citizenship. So I know.
So the tweet says, Kamala, quote, "We know our immigration system is broken and we know what it takes to fix it. Comprehensive reform," end quote. The person says, okay, why haven't you done it in the last 3 years? Why don't you fix it right now? And you know, despite what this person may believe, I probably don't have that much overlap in agreement with him, but he's correct. I mean, she is the vice president and she has had 3 years to fix this immigration issue. Now, you and I both know the real source of the immigration issue, and it's not anything that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party will ever fix, because that really goes against the system of exploitation that they are, you know, honed in on. So your thoughts about that?
No, I agree 100%. Like, they are, the only way to keep the system as it is to not do anything at all while pretending to, which is the liberal approach to it, while pretending that you know that this is a messed up situation. You know, which is basically what she's doing. She's talking on it, but she's lying. She's like, yeah, I know this is messed up, but I'm not about to do anything. I'm going to kind of play along with what's going on with the immigration system in the country. Because if we look, right, if we can deduce that this is a system that's been here long before either you or I existed, and nothing's changed either under Democratic or Republican regime.
Yeah.
She's not going to change that. She's a player within a system that has remained a system for centuries.
Agreed.
The players change, the game itself remains the same.
Yeah. My issue is, if people like Kamala Harris really wanted to solve the immigration issue, it's actually quite easy. And people are like, oh, you're oversimplified it. No, it's actually quite easy. All you would need to do is change American foreign policy so that we stop destabilizing these countries like Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Stop destabilizing them. Take the sanctions off of them. Because why do we have sanctions on them anyway? Why? Because they won't play ball with U.S. imperialism?
No. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Ultimately,
that's
go ahead. Please.
It's more of they talk about locking up gangsters and shit like that. That's the most gangster shit because it's more like what they basically saying, but in political terms, is get down or lay down, and that's essentially what they've been doing to these places where sanctions have been placed, where blockades have been placed, with changing the language because you've got the ability to do that. So through weaponization of language, which is why I'm big on finding out kind of what these things mean. You know, even on a rudimentary level, right? When we were kids, it's like if you don't know what the meaning of something is, at least me anyway, my moms would make me go write it down like 5 times, put it in a sentence until I understood it.
Okay.
So when you hear Kamala speaking and she's talking, and even if you don't understand everything, it's all right. Nobody knows everything. Nobody sees everything. Wouldn't it make sense for you to examine why she's saying this or what the validity is in what she's saying? Mm-hmm. Particularly somebody you don't know from like a can of paint. Again, it is blind following that happens with the Kamala Harris situation. As far as the foreign policy itself is concerned, yeah, you're right. It is easily fixable if you would stop placing these sanctions, these blockades on Venezuela, on Cuba, so on and so forth. But if you stop placing the blockades, it deviates from U.S. interests, and they can't have that.
Of course, yeah. And, like, for instance, ending things like the drug war, ending the sanctions on Venezuela, on Cuba, on many of these other countries that are south of our southern border. And also making sure that the means, because if you end the drug war, then that means you take the power away from the cartels, which are really being empowered a lot of times by our CIA. Let's just look at the crack epidemic here in the United States. The crack epidemic was really pushed by the CIA. They actually admitted to it. So CIA was like, "Whoops, yeah, we actually put crack in your neighborhoods." And so, if you were to do that, that would disempower any of the drug cartels. And then on top of that, if we stop replacing their governments with our own puppets, like what the United States tried to do in Venezuela recently when they tried to
break the election.
Yeah, they tried to overturn the election. Like forget what they thought that Russia was trying to do. What about what America was trying to do in Venezuela? Like, why are we going to talk about that? And a lot of Venezuelans that end up coming here illegally. I put illegally in air quotes because, to be honest with you, we wouldn't have to deal with the influx of undocumented immigrants if they didn't have to flee the country because of economic sanctions tearing their country apart, because of the United States foreign policy trying to replace their democratically elected leaders with puppets. And so then they end up fleeing here. And I love how somebody said this. It is better to be behind the barrel of a gun instead of being in front of the barrel of the gun. So, of course, yeah, they're still going to suffer while they're here, but they'd rather suffer here inside the United States than be suffering outside the United States. So what's the best course of action for us? To be honest with you, is to make sure they're not suffering outside. So because people who have it good do not leave their country. That's the crazy part. Like, what if we had an influx of French citizens that came here undocumented? That doesn't make sense. Why? Because technically they kind of have it good in France. You don't have an influx of Canadians coming here because in some sense they have it good. Not completely, because they still live in a capitalist system, but they have it way better than a lot of these other countries because they're not being sanctioned to death. So when these countries actually are, allowed to have their sovereignty and self-determination, then they're going to be like, nah, because who wants to leave what their home is?
What I would say is that gets racialized too, though. Because if you got black folks or people that are our complexion coming from like France, it's a little bit more restrictive than somebody that's pale faced white coming from France or even coming from Canada. I had this experience with somebody I worked for with the current company that I'm at, like an assistant manager, white Canadian, would tell me about how she would go to like the immigration office because she was still looking for citizenship at that time, and she wouldn't get the same questions that like other people would get. It would be a quick sit down and then she's just about it there.
Oh wow.
Or even when we look at like the US and in relationship to France, they got money for Notre Dame, but they don't have money for Jackson, Mississippi. They don't have money for Flint, Michigan. They don't have money for this. People still dealing with holdover from Katrina. How long ago was Katrina? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, geez, Katrina was almost 20 years ago, man.
Right. And there's still people that are suffering from the aftermath of it, be it people that were made to move from a place where, okay, this is home for me. This is where I'm comfortable. This is where all my people at, and being dispersed into different places. When Katrina happened, I was still living in Queens, living in New York. I was actually working at Staples at the time. Long story short, but I had customers come in and they have recently displaced from Katrina.
Wow.
And I'm like, you got from Louisiana all the way to Queens, New York. Yeah. And the part that I live in is lesser known. So I'm like, that's even crazier to me.
Yeah. So when people talk about, oh my God, immigration is such a huge issue, I'm like, well, we can solve it. The problem is that the Democratic Party and Republican Party do not want to solve it because they want to keep the exploited labor coming in. They want to keep that, because the thing is like, it's easier to exploit somebody who is in fear of being deported than somebody who can't be deported. It's easier to exploit them because then they will accept the pay and the no benefits, the low pay and the no benefits, because they don't want to be kicked out and go back to a country where they're experiencing sanctions and social unrest because of what the United States foreign policy is doing. So they're going to play ball versus somebody like you and me. And, for those of us who are born in this country, right? We're not going to have that same fear because where they going to kick my ass to? They can't kick me nowhere back to Jersey. So that's the problem. The thing is, and the thing is, like, I can make demands and be like, no, I'm not going to do this work unless you guys pay me a living wage, unless you guys give me these benefits. And so ultimately, like, it's really just a system of, and I say there's two victims. There's the undocumented immigrants, and then there's the people who are born here that are racialized, like myself, like you, many Black and brown people who were born here. So there's two sets of victims. And the thing is like we're pitted against each other because now some of the immigrants that are coming in, they're giving just a little bit more than the rest of us. And then that makes us have resentment against them, which means that now you have a division among the working class. So you have a division among the undocumented working class and the documented working class. And now, next thing you know, we're fighting each other. And all because this division is being caused. And the funny part about it is, it's the same song, different dance. Because this is exactly what they did to African tribes in Africa. They would take one tribe and then slightly elevate them above the other tribe and give them benefits and then say, hey, look, they got more than you. And then they cause the tribes to war with each other instead of going after the colonialists. So it's the same song, different dance. And this is why I talk about solidarity.
They did it to poor whites here.
Each other. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying they did it to poor whites here, which is where a lot of the resentment and stuff comes from. We're going to draw a more, kind of like direct parallel in terms of like poor whites being told, okay, well, cool. They the ones that's taking your jobs. Long story short, just to kind of keep that particular part of it brief.
Well, yeah, that actually you just added to my point. The fact is that, during Reconstruction, then these same capitalists told the poor whites, hey man, these Negroes, they're taking your jobs. you know, and it's like, wait a minute, no, it's like, you guys are giving them to us so you guys can exploit us more, because the poor whites can actually demand more of the former enslavers instead. But they were also told to kick rocks because we were the exploited labor. Now that we have better rights, well, then they had to shift their gear to somebody who else they can exploit. Now it's undocumented immigrants. So it's like the undocumented immigrants are technically, you know, in the same place that we were. And so ultimately, ultimately, this is what Kukita says, it's a class war. And that's what it's been the entire time.
It's absolutely class war. It is undoubtedly class war. So that comment was right on the money as far as that particular aspect of it is concerned. But it's like, again, going back to examining the how, the why, the when, the what aspect of it, I think we got to sit down and really just think like, all right, cool, this person is definitely being super exploited. Like, you might make, example, $20 an hour, whatever, they getting 6, 7 off of the exploitation aspect of it in terms of their labor to do the same exact thing, and a lot of times more is being demanded of it in order for the capitalists, in order for the imperialists to maximize profit.
Yeah. And ultimately, you know, what do you say in your view is the best course of action for us to take at this stage? Because we're in the late stages of capitalism right now. This system is on its way down. We have a fork in the road now. There's two different sides. Either us going to be going towards socialism, or it's going to be towards fascism. And the thing is, it's like it's almost like a car on the road, and you have two people that have their hands on the wheel, and we're trying to pull it to the left, and the other person, which is the corporation, trying to pull it to the right. So what way can we maximize that tug to the left so that this car goes down the road that is egalitarian, equal, and equitable for everyone?
Honestly, the only solution I have to it, and it's already been attempted, so, you know, I'm working along the same lines of, you know, it's just political education matters. Political education matters. Organization matters. Being able to have conversation with those that you share the same class with in terms of what's going on. So I think until that divide is cleared up, we're going to be stuck with the same mess. That's the problem right there. Because as long as it's that they're getting what it is that we're supposed to have, as if what we have to understand about capitalism and money is not real. It's literally not a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a tool of capitalism, but it's not. It's imaginative, because it's also like, and I think Jamil El-Amin states this. You know, they can give you all the money, tell you bring them all the rocks, and then change the way that the currency itself is. So they could change it to whatever it is they want it to be. Anything, you know, riffing off of Jamil El-Amin again, maybe because it's Black August. Definitely free Jamil El-Amin, free all political prisoners. But what I would say in that particular situation, anything you don't control could be used as a weapon against you.
Yeah.
We don't control the economics. We don't control the political landscape. But part of the reason why we don't is you know, a lot of it is infighting at the benefit of those that are, you know, fucking everybody up, to be quite frank. So it's like, wait a minute, they doing this to you, yeah, they also doing this to me. So on a rudimentary, on a basic level, let's sit down and have a conversation about how we go about getting these motherfuckers to stop doing what it is that they doing on a domestic and a global scale.
Yeah.
And that happens with political education being the foundation, and then also having solid historical analysis. Because a lot of what is what was. It's not necessarily repetitive, but it parallels highly. Like, I shouldn't be able to open up a random page on a book and it's 2024 and this was written in like 1844 and the conditions themselves are the same.
What, as far as political education, how do people get into it? Because a lot of times we'll say political education, but the question is, it's like, some people can be miseducated too. So
Mhm.
like, because, you know, like for instance, I can Google things about China, and, you know, then I'll get something that is, you know, a CIA cutout that tries to tell you all the negative things about China, when in reality, you know, it's like, oh, I'm being educated on China, but then it's basically what the CIA and State Department wants you to know about China versus what actually goes on. So, you know, what direction would you point people towards as far as better political education so that they can become more aware?
Read everything. It's as simple. It's as simple as that. We don't take one source and generalize based off of that source. But okay, where's the citation at within this source? Go to the citation, see what it is that was actually said, because we know, and we were talking about it during a couple points in this conversation, that language can be manipulated to mean some shit that they didn't. People oftentimes take things out of context deliberately too, particularly politicians. So it's just reading and then also understanding what it is that you are reading. If you don't understand something as simple as that, look it up. It's basic. Even when we, you know, for as shitty as the education is in this place, one of the things that they teach you when you're young and you learn how to read like stories, maybe around first, second, third grade, depending on the school you go to, is to analyze who, what, when, here, you know, where, how, and why. This is an examination at the most basic level. And then somehow as time goes on, we devolve into not looking at these things and being stuck on what is, instead of examining again how it became, what was before it, so on and so forth. If you know, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so very much, because I want to direct people to answers, because a lot of times we'll talk about the issues surrounding the world. And the thing is, it's like, I don't want people to walk away with just a diagnosis of the problem. I want them to walk away with some solutions that they can use in order to push for something better. And so that's why I try to be more solutions oriented, especially on this channel and on my channel, because ultimately, you know, it's cathartic to hear, okay, you're not crazy, this is what's wrong. But it's also beneficial to go, okay, so this is what the diagnosis is. Here's a possible solution that could work for us. Now, get your ass out there and do it. You know,
It's that. I mean, it's not that simple. It's definitely difficult, because those far smarter than me have definitely tried, right? When we look at Du Bois, when we look at Malcolm, when we look at Garvey, when we look at MLK, you know, even though MLK is probably one of the most co-opted activists that we have, you get more often than not, I have a dream king versus the shit that he was actually murdered for. King was trending more towards socialism towards the end of his life and was the most hated by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also what history leaves out is shortly after King was murdered on the balcony at the Lorraine Motel, Lil Bobby Hutton is also murdered that same time frame within like a 4-day time span. One of the first members of the Black Panther Party. So we've had political organization, be it the Black Panther Party, or, you know, just we've had people that have been Black communists that have come before me, i.e. like Harry Haywood. And I lean on them often. I lean on their studies often, but even to bring it up to like contemporary times, a lot of the people that I admire that are far smarter than me, one of them being like Dr. CBS is amazing as far as analysis is concerned. So Sharice Burton Stellier is amazing, and she has this amazing piece of work called Black Scare, Red Scare, which ties into Black Marxism, which ties into it from a Pan-African perspective. And then also, you know, Orsami Burton's tip of the spear, because what he actually does, he's able to intertwine how without the jail cell, we're all kind of subject to this same damn life as Black people living under the boot of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at these things, and then I'll take a footnote from CBS, or I'll take a footnote from Orsami Burton, and I'll go and look at the work that they looked at and see what my analysis is there. Me, I'm one of those where my formal education is in poli-sci. But I pride myself on, if you are a true revolutionary, what that means is you have to meet contradiction head on. If I thought some shit was one way and it's really another, I have to acknowledge that. I have to be objective in my thought instead of subjective. I don't want my feelings affirmed. I want facts confirmed. It's a simple kind of thing. As far as, okay, cool, they got this from there. The first thing I'm looking at when I'm reading something, be it George Jackson, be it Walter Rodney, be it Huey P. Newton, is where did you get this information from? And then the information that's there, okay, how can I find out more nuance to what's here? Everything has to come from something. We're looking at, again, looking at the what is instead of, okay, what came before this. And no, you know, and nobody is without imperfection. Everybody is subject to human error. So there are situations in which I'll be like, all right, cool, this worked at that point, but it's not going to work here because for the little bit of change that does occur, theory that lasted in the 60s, 70s may not work as praxis in 2024. So we have to think about our actual material conditions, our material reality, and move based off of that.
Understood. Very well said. Thank you so much. So, you know, I just want to direct people to your link tree that you have. This is from the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also look into a lot of their links here, talking about the Horn of Africa. So it's built the AAPRP. It has their platforms, many different resources here. And so I'll link that also in the chat as well, so that people can go to those resources. Now, just a question. I was going to go into this next segment about Khaliifah Williams. Are you okay to stick around for that one? Or
yeah, I definitely got time. I probably got to get refill on my coffee in a little bit, but I definitely got time. Okay. My bad if I'm a little off. I was out last night at a concert, so I was out a little bit late. We were talking about my sleep habits a little earlier on, but
yeah. Well, I hope the concert was good. I hope it was a banger because
it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, okay,
it
cool.
was Diggable Planets. It was amazing, which even within that concert was what tied me into kind of Black August and thinking about things as they are. So I'm definitely here for it to have a conversation about the brother Khaliifah Williams.
All right, cool. Okay, so we're gonna get into that right now. I would like to go into the next segment. So we're going to be talking about Free Khaliifah Williams. This is a story that I think that many people need to be directed towards. The reason why is because this points to the horrors of our carceral system and why it needs to be rebuilt. I'm not saying reformed, I see rebuilt. So let's get into it right now. So I'm going to share this webpage. There is a gentleman by the name of Marcellus Khaliifah Williams. He has actually been on death row for over 20 years. And he is a man that is innocent. So I'm going to be going into this because y'all need to know about this, because he is set to have a hearing later this month on the 21st. So this is out of freekhaliifah.org. And so I just want to read this. And Shaquille, please feel free to interrupt and add anything that you would like to while I'm reading. But I can't see you.
What's interesting about the Khaliifah Williams case is DNA evidence proves that he, in fact, did not murder that reporter, but the court is willing to do away with the DNA and take hearsay from somebody that snitched that was within the same jail as Khaliifah Williams. Now, throwing away, I'm not an attorney, but throwing away a key piece of concrete evidence is a deeply flawed way to decide on a case, particularly one where it's a matter of life. But we also know, as we sit here in Black August and we, you know, share solidarity with our political prisoners, look at the things that have happened historically. Now, if we go, I was born in the 80s, 86. Mumia Abu-Jamal has been in prison longer than I've been alive. And there's no substantive evidence there either. Even when we look at Comrade George Jackson, that 1 to life indeterminate sentence that he got, there was no substantive evidence. It was just a matter of, okay, well, he took this. And again, I'll go back to something I said a couple times during the episode. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I say it to say Khaliifah Williams' case is, his appeal case is scheduled for August 21st. George Jackson was assassinated on August 21st, 1971. So, and looking at this and connecting the dots, we have to figure out a way to get all these political prisoners free. We have to continue to raise our voices. We have to continue to raise these cases. That we have to continue to make people aware, educate them on who these people are. Khaliifah Williams is not just a number. Solidarity with that brother. Comrade George Jackson has taught me more than I learned in any college classroom. Mumia has taught me more than anything I've learned in any college classroom. Even Malcolm at one point was Detroit Red. That's widely regarded. That's why I love Malcolm so much. It's that imperfection that's there. You know, and just even looking at you know, Leonard Peltier being a Native American that is a political prisoner and he just had his case denied. Khaliifah Williams is on death row, which Mumia was on death row for a number of years before he got relocated into just doing a life sentence. I forget the phrasing of it now, so forgive me if I don't have it off the top of my head, but all of these are things that happen within the U.S. devoid of evidence that the person in question did what they say they did. Even when we look at Assata Shakur, another ideological parent of mine, I got that too. And I'm kind of disappointed that we don't have more work from Assata, but Assata was exiled into one of those spaces that we said is faced with U.S. sanctions, which is the blockade. And every so often, what comes about, and it came about during the Obama administration, is the release of Assata Shakur. And I appreciate the Cubans for holding it down, because why the hell would you do that? They don't even have, not only was there not enough substantive evidence to convict Assata Shakur, but there was no way possible she would have been able to do it, because she was already shot at the time that they were saying that she shot somebody on a New Jersey Turnpike. And I could speak from experience, the hospital that they brought her to, ironically enough that we would be having this conversation, is a hospital that I spent the majority of my childhood in Elmhurst, Queens. So when I read Assata, there's that connection there. My grandmother was also a nurse in that hospital for like 30-something years. I never got a chance to ask my grandmother or my mother any questions in regard to that time period, because if I'm being honest, usually when you're around gran or your mom, you're usually trying to get a plate, go kick it, and do something else. You're not thinking about your parents as anything else but that. But looking at Assata Shakur and looking at Leonard Peltier and looking at Khaliifah Williams, even a few years back, the brother Khalif Browder that was held on Rikers. Because I grew up in Queens, Rikers was literally right there. He's also a victim of the state. I don't care what the autopsy says about how he left out. Look at what happened before, cause and effect. He was subjected to beatings. All of this for a backpack that he never took. And going back to Khaliifah Williams, all this for a life that he never took. If the DNA states that he wasn't there, he didn't do it. You know, and I'll say something that stated before we started, Aaron. Black folks near and far get prosecuted for the shit they believe we did because of what they think of us. White people walk away freely despite evidence of these other things, right? When you look at the police that beat Rodney King in the 90s, when you look at more recently Kyle Rittenhouse, George Jackson got an indeterminate sentence of 1 in life when he was 17 years old. Kyle Rittenhouse gets to walk free, and you know he was killing people with military arms.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that phrase from D.L. Hughley. Now, like, I know he's a liberal and he has some terrible takes, but one of the things that he said that I definitely agree with is the most dangerous place for a Black person to exist is in white people's imagination.
No, he's accurate, and DL definitely has some liberal politics. But I say it like this: if we really gonna think objectively, we can get this information from anybody, anywhere, and look at how it applies to the situation that we in.
Yeah.
So his celebrity status or comedic status aside, I'm not expecting him to be a teacher. And I think that's kind of where people fall short, is kind of just looking at the celebrity to tell you, how you should think, and they put you into like this sort of group think because you enjoy the celebrity. I enjoy a lot of the music. I'll be doing the same shit most people do, man. I listen to all of it. I tune in to like, X-Men. I tune in to like the Marvel movies. I tune in to, clips of like reality TV shows and shit. But then I turn it off because this not they there, for entertainment purposes strictly, and that's where it stops. I'm not trying to get my political analysis from somebody I know is politically undereducated. But the ones that are politically educated, which is where it kind of gets fuzzy, are in large part doing the dirt. Be it you a professor and you kind of know because you've done extensive amount of research, or you are Kamala Harris with a political science degree from Howard and a law degree from elsewhere, and you got no policy. Anybody that's majored in political science, myself included, can tell you just the rigors of the reading. And I still got textbooks in my house now from when I was doing my undergrad, the rigors in the reading that you have to do, particularly if you are prepping for law school. I have comrades now that are prepping for law school. Shout out to Comrade Veronique. Shout out to Comrade Sanika. And I look at these young people, and that's kind of where my hope is at. But yeah, back to the Khalif Williams thing. It is the system being the system. We have to stop allowing it to take place. I feel like if you are Black with a platform, you have an obligation to your people. And so as Kwame Ture would state, if you're not working for your people, by default, you're working against your people. Yeah, and if you got following that's amassed millions, like respects to her, but why is Kalani the biggest voice that I hear out of celebrities as far as Palestine, Congo, Sudan, shit that happens here, so on and so forth, when it's people that have amassed millions and millions in a large platform and are definitely thinking about themselves, because it's like they don't want to lose that platform, so they won't speak on what it is despite the fact that they know otherwise. That's where I fall in that, like, having a problem. Because there's no reason why there shouldn't be more raised about Khalif Williams. No reason why there shouldn't be more raised about Mumia, about Jamil Al-Amin, who, even with Jamil Al-Amin, it's like I get into his work heavy. He's another one that's been incarcerated for over 25 years. Same like Khalif Williams, I think is what, 26 now? Because he's been in there since 98.
Wow. Yeah.
So 26 years of your life gone for some shit that you had no part in, and DNA as concrete evidence to prove that you had no part in.
Yeah.
With Mumia, it is damn near 50 years. But
yeah, I mean, Mumia went in when I was little, because I was living in Camden around that time. I was living in Camden when the MOVE bombing happened. Right across the bridge. So
that's all I'm gonna say. Camden is a stone's throw away from Philly, so you right there. I know because I'm from the tri-state area. So
Yeah, and when my grandmother died last year, we were with some cousins, afterwards, and I asked them about the MOVE bombing that happened. MOVE bombing happened in '85. I was born in '84, right? And so when that happened, I asked them, do you guys remember that? They said, oh yeah, vividly. They remember exactly what happened. How do I know? Because I got family that live in West Philly, 45th and Sampson. All right. So the MOVE bombing happened near my family, right? And they could have destroyed my family. And when it comes to these political prisoners, and I would consider people like Khaliifah Williams as a political prisoner, because if you have somebody that is innocent and you have DNA evidence that would exonerate that person, and yet you don't want to exonerate them and you don't want to see the DNA evidence, that turns into a political issue. That's not just a crime and punishment issue.
Mass incarceration is very much a political issue. When you look at the discrepancy and you look at how many of us are locked behind the wall for shit that they think we did as opposed to what actually happened, all of these names I've already mentioned, being Jamil Al-Amin, be it Khaliifah Williams and Khalif Browder, be it, so all of these things are, and it's weird to hear people say, well, political violence is not the way. What would you call incarcerating somebody for an extensive period of time and removing them away from society? That's an act of political violence.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to continue in the reading of this just so that people have the facts. It says Marcellus Khaliifah Williams is scheduled for execution on September 24th. That's next month. Despite DNA evidence proving his innocence, the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney has filed a motion to vacate his conviction, citing the exculpatory DNA evidence. A hearing is set for August 21st to review this evidence. The case against Williams is based on unreliable witness testimony, and forensic evidence from the crime scene does not match him. Despite these findings, the Missouri Attorney General is pushing for his execution. I'm going to repeat that part. The Missouri Attorney General is pushing for his execution. This case highlights issues of wrongful convictions and racial bias in the justice system. Now, here's a summary of the case. It says DNA evidence proves Marcellus Khaliifah Williams is innocent, yet Missouri plans his execution for September 24th. Khaliifah faces execution on September 24th for a crime DNA evidence proves he did not commit. The St. Louis County prosecuting attorney reviewed the DNA results and filed a motion to vacate Williams' conviction, asserting DNA evidence clearly exonerates him. The circuit court has set a hearing for August 21st to examine the exculpatory evidence and address the motion. Williams has spent 24 years on Missouri's death row, consistently asserting his innocence. Felicia Gale, the former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was found stabbed to death in her home on August 11th, 1998. So 26 years ago to this day. It says the crime scene was rich with forensic evidence, including fingerprints, a bloody shoe print, hair, and trace DNA on the murdered weapon. None of this evidence matched Williams. The prosecution's case relied heavily on testimonies from two witnesses who were incentivized with leniency in their own criminal cases and reward money. One witness, Henry Cole, claimed Williams confessed to him while they were in jail. He directed police to Laura Azzaro, a former girlfriend of Williams with a significant criminal record. Both witnesses provide information inconsistent with their own previous statements, each other's accounts, and the crime scene evidence. The only other evidence was a witness who testified Williams sold him a laptop taken from the victim's home, without mentioning that Williams had received the laptop from Azzaro. So it says incentivized informant testimony, which played a critical role in Williams' conviction, is leading cause of wrongful convictions, particularly in death penalty cases. Furthermore, racial bias contributed to Williams' wrongful conviction. Williams, a black man, was convicted by a nearly all-white jury, with the prosecutor removing most black jurors. Studies have shown racial disparities in application of death penalty in St. Louis County, which defendants are more likely to receive the death penalty if the victim is white. I just want to stop by saying this also was very indicative of what happened to people like Assata Shakur, because she faced all white juries in her cases, when even though she was completely innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And so she actually says this, she actually explains this in her autobiography. If you have not, I highly suggest you pick up two books. You pick up Assata Shakur's autobiography, You pick that up and you give it a thorough read. And then you also pick up George Jackson's book, Blood in My Eye. Now, just to let you guys know, on my channel, I actually did a reading and discussion of these books already. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to that. But I highly recommend you pick these up yourself. Either get the PDF if you need to, or you pick up the actual physical copy of the book and read through them. And it will let you know that our carceral system is, and people say it's broken. No, it's working exactly as intended. And that makes it even more egregious. So I just want to put that out there for you guys.
I would also, just as an aside, recommend if you are going to purchase Asado, if you are going to purchase Blood in My Eye, I would do it from either Black-owned or independently owned bookstore. Don't Barnes and Noble them works if you can avoid it, or don't get it from Amazon if you can avoid it. There is bookshop.org. You can go, there's, Midnight Books, there's Marcus Books, which is in Oakland. There's Grassroots. So there's actually a directory of Black-owned bookstores.
Oh, okay.
So put the money back into it that way. Whenever I purchase something, I definitely try to make sure I purchase either Black-owned or independently owned.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that recommendation. All right, so let's continue there. It says, new DNA test confirms innocence, but no court has reviewed it. Despite the DNA testing confirming Williams' innocence, no court has thoroughly reviewed this evidence. In 2015, DNA testing showed Williams was not the source of the male DNA found on the murder weapon. However, in 2017, the Missouri Supreme Court scheduled his execution without considering these results. Then Governor Eric Greitens stayed the execution hours before it was to occur and convened a board of inquiry to review the case. This board was dissolved by Governor Mark Parson in June 2023 without issuing a report or recommendation. Consequently, a new execution date was promptly sought. St. Louis County prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell, after reviewing the DNA evidence, concluded Williams is innocent. This review, supported by findings from 3 independent DNA experts, confirmed Williams was not the source of the DNA on the weapon or other forensic evidence at the crime scene. In January 2024, Bell filed a motion to vacate Williams' conviction, urging the circuit court to correct this miscarriage of justice. Despite the pending motion of legal requirements for a hearing, the Missouri Attorney General has maintained that Williams' innocence is irrelevant, and the Missouri Supreme Court has scheduled this execution. I want you guys to focus on this. It says, despite the pending motion and legal requirements for a hearing, the Attorney General of Missouri has maintained that Williams' innocence is irrelevant. So even though DNA evidence proves he wasn't there, that's irrelevant. Kill him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a justice system that deserves to be just reformed? Or should we completely dismantle it and rebuild an actual justice system? Because there's no reason that if DNA evidence comes out and goes, this person's innocent, then it's like, give this man reparations for being in prison for 24 years and release him immediately. Like, why is this being subject to further inquiry? And why does the Attorney General have this much power to say, well, we're not going to listen to DNA evidence? And I'm sorry, but people are going to get mad at me for this, but this is the type of shit that Kamala Harris does.
No, that's valid, because there's actually a case, and I forget this brother's name, where he spent, I think, 7 to 8 years behind bars because of Kamala Harris signing off on some shit, and came out to a settlement. But it's also, if you losing years on your life, there's no amount of money that can make up for that. There's this premium on price. You cannot put a price on human life, and the state and the superstructure, that being the U.S., has historically done that and repeatedly does that, because hopefully, which would be the lesser of two things here, if Khaliifah Williams is exonerated, you just put this man in prison for 2.5 decades and gave him some money and told him to go about his business. let's go back to the 80s momentarily with what we've been talking about as far as like things that were political, right? Look at Donald Trump in the Central Park 5.
Yup. And even when they were exonerated, Donald Trump still thought they should have been executed.
Yep. And he took out a full-page paper. So when people be like, oh, how is he racist? And I've had stupid white people be like, oh, he's not racist. It's just a difference of opinion. It's not a difference of opinion when it's a matter of somebody's life or death, when it's a matter, when it's something that's very much rooted in somebody's oppression.
Yup.
The state is going to be the state. The United States is going to be the United States, but it's up to us, particularly when the language that gets used more often than not is cryptic. Use that dictionary. George Jackson, who we were just talking about, is very much an autodidact because he got pulled away during his formative years. So everything that he learned, all of his redemption came through reading Marx, through reading Lenin, through, so and him studying and him reading George Jackson, Blood in My Eyes, probably one of the more brilliantly written books, scholar or non-scholar, as far as I'm concerned, in regard to the way shit really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that book was a little spicy, and I had to read it because I couldn't read Blood in My Eye on YouTube. They would have took down my channel immediately. Like, you're spreading propaganda. Like, that's why I had to read on Rock.
I would also say this, and it's like mixed emotions about it, but I would also tell people, and it's just my personal belief, read Soledad Brother too. I know that he didn't really care for Soledad Brother, but what I see in Soledad Brother is just that development of his political ideology, particularly towards the end of the book, before you get to like a Blood in My Eye.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to, I was recommended to this by Roger to start reading A. Philip Randolph. So I want to get into that as well. But the point being is that, these systems are constantly putting us in the state of either exploitation. If we can't be exploited, then our lives need to be ended. That's basically what they said. Let me finish this. It says, historically, the Attorney General's office has opposed innocent victims, including efforts by local prosecutors to overturn wrongful convictions, as seen in the recent exonerations of Kevin Strickland and Lamar Jackson. August 21st hearing will be a critical moment for reviewing the DNA evidence and potentially correcting this grave injustice. So this is Khaliifah Williams. He also is a poet. He converted to the Nation of Islam. Well, he converted to being a Muslim. And that's why his name is now Khaliifah. And so, I like to humanize the people who are unjustly treated in this country. So this is who he is. No doubt a son, sibling, cousin. I don't know if he has any kids, but if he does, then he's a father. If not, then he's still somebody's loved one. He's a human being. And the thing is, it's like a human being that is innocent, that had been pegged as someone who is guilty. And all because a lot of times the state, doesn't really want to do the work of actually finding the person who actually committed the crime. And they just want to open and shut. And it's easier to do it against a Black person than it is against somebody who, may have not been Black that actually, committed the crime. So
it's also propagandizing the media, though, but it's also control the media, control the narrative. And when you look at these billionaires that own the press, which historically this has been talked about too, that own the press, this is why news gets pushed out like that, which is why we have to go beyond whatever the mainstream depictions are of oppressed people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I want to share this too. This was an article that was written a couple months back, actually last month. And let me enlarge this just so that everybody can see. says, we cannot let Missouri kill Marcellus Khaliifah Williams, the black man proven innocent but scheduled to be executed in September. So this goes over a lot of the same information, but I just wanted to give a little bit more credence to his voice. He says, I don't have to write. In fact, I've been long periods of time where I didn't write a piece at all, but it's a way for me to express myself, communicate, to be understood. So that was from the Innocence Project posting what he has said and about his writing of poetry. And so this basically talks about how the Missourians, to abolish the death penalty, they've been trying to get clemency for people who are innocent since 2005. And I thought this was also very interesting. I want to just show this here. So it says Michelle Smith joined the Missourians against the death penalty as a racial justice coordinator in 2021. This was the first and crucial step in establishing Black leadership in the organization. Smith now serves as the organization's co-director. She told us historically in death penalty movement, Black folks have not been included. Religious white folks and attorneys are the most visible. Is that any surprise? Like I do appreciate white people who are, pushing for this, but at the same time, this also has to be included. It says, as organizations like MADP teach, the death penalty finds a historical precedent in the state-sanctioned killings like lynchings and the mass genocide of indigenous people. Movement leadership from Black people, people of color, and formerly incarcerated individuals is incredibly vital. And I agree with this. It's like the people who are the most disenfranchised should really be the ones who should lead the movements. It says, as potential ruling in dozens of different crimes to change in each state, the death penalty is extremely subjective sentence. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, while Black people make up 14.4% of the population, there are 33.9% of the people sentenced in death penalty cases. Now, this is also one of the reasons why I am also personally against the death penalty. People can look at me crazy all you want, but the thing is like, as long as there's a 1% chance that somebody innocent is going to get killed, I do not agree with the death penalty. Because too many of my people, of our people, have been put to death, even though they've been innocent. And so I don't think it's right that we should risk the death of somebody innocent just to get at people who have actually legitimately done something wrong. Because now you're now sweeping in people who are victims of the system who haven't done anything wrong, and you're sentencing them to death along with people who may have done something heinous. And I don't think that's fair, because one life lost is a life too many, in my view. So this is this has some more details about the case in regards to Khaliifah Williams. So I highly recommend that people also go over this. So I'll be sharing both links to both of these sites in the chat. And ultimately, if you are in Missouri and if you can support Khaliifah Williams, please go and do that, because, every single time, we have somebody who is placed on death row like this, it just continuously perpetuates the sickness of the system. And, if we can save a life just by going and standing outside of a courthouse to show solidarity, then that's what we can do. Because, people are put to death by the state all the time. Hell, George Floyd was put to death by the state. Sandra Bland was put to death by the state.
Even before that, Ahmaud Arbery was also, killed by the state, if we're being real about it, because they try to hide that case because these two were ex-officers.
Yeah.
The white dudes that killed Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
They had ties to the police, so it's still state-sanctioned violence in my eyes.
Yeah. Roger Fortson was executed by the state, and he was an airman, right? Yeah, that was recent. How many people talked about Noah Bush? Noah Bush was an 8-year-old boy, and the state tried to cover up his murder because he was murdered by a 10 and 11-year-old white boy. So the thing is like we're constantly having to fight against the state and state-sanctioned violence. So make your voices known. I put the links in the chat, and if you guys can go there and do all the things, sign all the petitions and things like that.
Sonia Massey, not to cut you off, but you can't forget Sonia Massey being murdered in cold blood the way that she was at the hands of the state. Which is why qualified immunity is a crock of shit, and both parties are in favor of keeping it exactly as it is. Sonia Massey was murdered at the hands of the state. I can't and I won't watch the video. I'm good on the trauma porn, but that has to be accounted for as well, particularly somebody that was dealing with a mental health crisis. Because one of the things that white folks get to have in their back pocket is they get to claim insanity whenever some shit happens.
Yeah. Or just like that young boy that beat up his teacher after the video game was taken away. And that kid was neurodivergent, and come to find out they actually were told, that teacher was told to not take things away from them. And the kid was neurodivergent, and they will have more sympathy for somebody that is a mass shooter than they will for this kid who's neurodivergent. You know what I'm saying? It's like, nah, bro. Like, you guys will have so much sympathy for somebody who's white that is neurodivergent, or that it has an intellectual disability, or they seem mentally unstable, but yet they will never have that same type of grace for us. That's why I say the system is sick. And this is why whenever somebody says the system is broken, I always correct them and say it's not broken, it's working as intended. The system is inherently sick because it was built, by sick people. I encourage people to read Prejudicial. I'm reading this on my channel too, by Margaret Kimberly. If you look at some of the people who were the founders of this country, the founders of the country were some sick people. And people are going to look at me, oh my God, I can't believe you said, look, Thomas Jefferson was a child molester. We got to call a thing a thing. We got to be real, we got to talk about these things in this reality. And so when people talk about, oh, well, the founders of the writers of the Constitution and blah, 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 there were a bunch of sick people too. And so the thing is that the system is built on the ideas of some sick people. So therefore, we have to dismantle it and build it as something that's healthy for all of humans. And this is why I do what I do. And Shaquille, this is why you do what you do.
Yeah, no, that's valid. Naturally, I'm introverted. I told you how nervous I was before I even got into the conversation. That's why I'm like, for me, it got to a point where it's like I have to say something. It can't just be, not getting my voice out there particularly and knowing certain things. But this is all credit again to all African People's Revolutionary Party, to the community that shaped and molded me in Woodside houses, to my wife, to my sisters, to my nieces. I've got, and my nephew as well. So I've got people that I have to be able to make sure that if they don't have the ability to articulate it, and I do, it'd be wholly irresponsible for me not to.
Yeah.
And to tell it like it is. Like, you have to be objective in these assessments. And I think that even with the current status of things, the presidential election, people are failing horribly at objectivity because they're romanticizing Kamala Harris. They're romanticizing the people that this is how shit got messed up with Obama. Romanticize Obama. And you know, even with like certain slogans and shit like that, right? Like if you look at Issa Rae, I'm rooting for everybody that's black. I'm sorry, I'm not rooting for Clarence Thomas. I hope when he goes, it's horrible. Because you know, he's rotten. I think Kamala is rotten. I think Obama is rotten. I don't care whether you commit a crime against my people with a smile on your face or you do it with a scowl. The end result of it is the same.
Absolutely. And look, whether you're a loud, obnoxious extrovert like myself, or you're an introvert like Shaquille, it doesn't matter. Use your voice however you can, because, and this is why I encourage, if you are trying to get, and independent media is not just being in front of a camera. Independent media could be you just writing articles, right? You could just be, you know, a faceless person that's writing articles on Substack or on Medium. I don't care. But as long as you're trying to educate people towards a better, more equal and equitable system, then do it and talk to your neighbors. Even if it's behind a computer screen, you know, do what you can. Because ultimately we have to build class solidarity. We have to build, you know, a better system. And we can only do it by being neighbors to one another. That's ultimately what I think, man. And, you know, I see what you're doing and I appreciate, you know, we may have some disagreements on, you know, here and there, you know, because not everybody's going to agree on everything. But ultimately, I know one thing that you and I sure as hell agree on is that this system is untenable and we need one that is built for the people, by the people, and not built for the corporate parasites by the corporate parasites.
Right.
You know?
Right. And what you just defined is actual democracy, which again goes back into, if we're looking at, you know, if you're going to say Marxism is some white shit, where's democracy coming from? Isn't the origin of it Greek?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we can't be like, all right, we going for this. But yeah, no, I mean, we definitely, there's some disagreements, but I'm okay with that. I'm not above reproach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tell people this all the time. I'm not perfect. Like, I'm not arrogant enough. And I know I stand on the shoulders of people that came before me and some of the ones that are still here. I marvel from afar at the, you know, the work that like a Orasami Burton is able to do with Tip of the Spear, or what Dr. CBS is able to do with Black Scare, Red Scare, and also I think it's, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing the name, but it's her and Jody Dean fight Organized Win. You know, so there's still methods in which we can employ that should be something that we can all agree on in order to get from under the boot of capitalism and ultimately from under the boot of imperialism.
Yeah. Definitely. So also, can you let people know where they can find you and what you have coming up soon?
So currently working on political education courses out here in the Phoenix area in Arizona, and then I can be found across socials as Pan-African. So that's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, and that's PANAFRIKEEM as a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm easily accessible. I'm one conversation away, irrespective of what people's ideology might be. The only way we're going to get to the world we want is if we build it ourselves. Mm-hmm. I'm not really going to go back and forth with people where I'm like, okay, you want your feelings affirmed versus you want to face contradictions and really be on some revolutionary shit. I don't necessarily have the energy for it. It's a quick block, I promise you.
Mm-hmm.
But I do appreciate being able to engage in genuine conversation and genuine discourse. So I appreciate y'all having me on the platform, despite nerves and everything like that. But no, I definitely can. Your perspective is valued, man. I tell people this all the time. Like, we're not gonna get nowhere with infighting. I've seen it go left. Like, if the end goal is the same, the methodology itself will work that shit out, because we've seen it historically. We've seen it with Malcolm Martin. We've seen it with Du Bois Garvey. We've seen it, right? And if the end goal is supposed to be liberation, we got to figure out a way to work that out.
Yeah. Look, like you, I just want the world to win, bro.
That's it.
I just want the world to win.
Call it Marxism, call it Maoism, call it whatever you want to call it. But it has to be something that is equitable. It has to be something that's fair. It has to be something that doesn't involve you co-signing the exploitation, the murder, the pretty much the dehumanization of anybody else. That I'll never agree with. I don't care what ideology, what ideological framework you're working out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so very much for joining. And I please make sure to come back on. Don't be a stranger.
Man, I appreciate it. I'd love to come back on.
All right. Thank you so much. Shaquille Sunflower, everybody. All right. I'll catch you in the DMs.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Thank you so very much. He was very gracious enough to stick with me for the story about Khaliifah Williams, which I'm very appreciative of. And, we also need that perspective as well. We got to talk about what's going on with the carceral system and how it's damaging to all of us. Just think about, how the carceral system not only affects those of us who are Black, but think about also the poor white people who are being negatively affected by this carceral system too. Like if you're white, you need to dismantle this system too, because the thing is, like, they're hurting you too, right? And ultimately, they want you to also serve as slaves to the system. Remember, you're a bigger population too, which means that they're going to want some of y'all too. So we got to work together. That's what we have to do. So that being said, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. We're going to get into the chat. But before we do this, just want to give a big shout out to the patrons on Patreon. This list has to be updated, but we will be doing that soon. Just want to give a shout out to all of you because you guys allow us to be able to do this work on the ground. I know that there is a lot going on as of late, but we try to walk the walk as well as talk the talk here on RBN. Of course, I just did a mutual aid event last week. And then also, I think it's next week, Sabby will be doing a mutual aid event, as well as Nick is doing a mutual aid event. Rome is still building a library. And so we're just trying to build that revolutionary optimism, build a revolutionary spirit. And we're also trying to make sure that, people are, having more solidarity among each other, more solidarity among workers. And so you guys allow us to be able to keep the lights on and be able to do this. So I just want to thank you all so very much from the top and bottom of our hearts for allowing us to be able to do this and supporting the channel. So it's deeply appreciated. So we're going to go to the comments in the chat. Going to say some hellos, some how you doings, and then we'll get to our final segment. So we have Terry Connolly coming in saying, good afternoon, JB and fam. Good to see you. Crumb says, JB, good to see you. They say, peace. Thank you so much. B says, JB looking fly. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's Sunday. CBC voter says, happy Sunday at JB. Good to see you, CBC voter. Not your mama says, peace and cheers. All right. Good to see you here. Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, JB and everyone, good to see you. My comrade, Nick, banger after banger Cruz coming in saying, hey, JB, have a good show, my beautiful brother. Thank you so very much. Oh, Nick, by the way, if you're still watching, oh my gosh, that show on Friday. Shahid Bolson. Oh, and then Sabby came and crashed the stream. Oh, that was wonderful. If you guys have not, go ahead and give that stream a view. I think it's probably close to 6,000 views already. It was a wonderful stream. I was listening to it when I was on the exercise bike kicking my own ass. So it's a good one. All right. So, it says, welcome, Shaquille. Peace. Yes, that was a great guest that we had. Sophia says, Palestine. Yes, free Palestine. Jacqueline says, has this channel been demonetized? No. Not that last time I checked. No. Says I've been trying to send a £2 super sticker, but it doesn't seem to be going through. I've tried it twice now, and I daren't try anymore just in case. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it works better over the computer or over the phone. I'm not sure. Sometimes it'll do that. Sometimes these apps and websites are wonky, but thank you so very much. Either way, appreciate it. Black Man Walking says, good afternoon, JB. I'm still poor, still black, and still revolutionary, and I still love you guys at RBN. We love you too. Thank you so very much, Black Man Walking. Oh, man. Roger Meadows says, Shaq, I'm right here in Nassau. Let's get together and make New York State a citizen ballot initiative amendment state, and we can go around government to make our lives better. Roger, I put the link to his Twitter in the chat. So if you want to get together with him, then you can try to get together with him in New York State. Of course, I read this already. Should ADOS and not ADOS be in same reparations claim? Roger says he never answered my question. I will take that as a yes. His route would kill our legislation in court because it violates the 14th Amendment. Reparations is not a racial claim, but a status claim. Thank you very much for that. Roger also says Bell, who beat Bush in Missouri, allows CBI benefits in Democratic. Death penalty. Okay. So Bell, who beats Cori Bush in Missouri, allows CBI amendments in death penalty. Thank you very much for that. MC says, thank you very much for this super chat. Says love and solidarity. Love and solidarity back to you as well. So, okay, cool. Great. I hope you guys are able to, despite any, disagreements, you guys are able to get together on that for the CBI amendments to push for that. Also, by the way, guys, just to let you guys know, on my channel, I'm also covering the citizen ballot initiatives for 2024 for this year on my channel. So if you guys would like to, if you guys are in Florida, I highly recommend that you guys listen to those citizen ballot initiatives, the amendments that will be voted on by us, the citizens in Florida. The reason being is because this directly affects us as citizens, and it is direct democracy. So if you guys are watching my channel, especially if you live in Florida, or if you just want to be inspired for ballot initiatives in your state, then you guys go ahead and give that a listen. It's already up on my channel, and you guys can just look up, me talking about Florida Amendment 1. I'll be covering Amendment 2 this Tuesday as well. So I highly suggest you guys take a look at that as well. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much to Zoe. Says, hey, James, great stream. Trauma Queen coming in saying this was an awesome stream day. Thank you. Thank you very much, Trauma Queen. Appreciate it. What? Travis Will says, was JB and Usher at the wedding? You can see me with the white gloves, can't you? FM says, poor whites only care about white power. I would say that is an overgeneralization. A lot of poor white people are lied to. But it's not saying, I wouldn't say that it's all poor whites. And I wouldn't say that, because it's kind of an overgeneralization. Just like there's a lot of white people, particularly like the Melungeons, the rednecks, the hillbillies, that see the system for what it is. And some of them realize that they need to have solidarity with us. That means a lot of them are tossing away the white supremacist thinking and wanting to build solidarity and class solidarity with us. And they realize that clinging to white power is actually an antithesis. It is contrary to their liberation as well. So I would say that there are some white people, definitely, who actually want to see us liberated, because that means if we're liberated, that means that also means their liberation too. So I wouldn't say that it's, I wouldn't say it as just a general, you know what I mean? We got to be careful about generalizations. So, and I would say that the higher on the economic ladder they are, those white people, some of them care more about white power than the poorer ones, because the system actually worked for them, and now they want to keep that power and maintain it in that place. So this is why channels like this exist, so that people can learn. But thank you very much, FM. So let's get into the next subject that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about unionization. Let's get into it. So, Brightline Workers Union. So there's a rail system here in Florida called Brightline. Now, Brightline is a privately owned rail system that operates here in Florida. Brightline goes now from South Florida, Miami, and West Palm, and it comes up into Orlando, and then it goes into Tampa. At first hearing about this, I was happy until I realized that it was privately owned. It is not a publicly owned entity, even though they utilize public dollars in order to build the rail system as well as the stations. And so, of course, with it being privately owned, the gear towards, or the inclination towards, allowing the workers to unionize is typically not, looked favorably upon. But I would like to share this story. This is more of a news story in the positive sense. I want to share this. This is out of Orlando Weekly. Let's enlarge just a little bit. It says, Brightline, Florida attendants seek to unionize in historic organizing efforts. So this is the Brightline train. So it says just over 100 onboard attendants for Brightline, Florida, including workers in Orlando, have begun the process of unionizing with the Transport Workers Union, an international labor union that represents more than 155,000 workers across the airline, railroad, transit, and related sectors in the United States. It says, in a historic effort by the workers in a state that is generally considered hostile to labor unions, and where less than 5% of the private sector workforce has union representation. Yes, let's be honest. Here in Florida, unions are heavily suppressed, even more than the general, populace of the United States. Of course, people like Ron DeSantis does not like unions because for him, he is a corporate stooge. So of course, he's going to be anti-union. Ron DeSantis does not care about the workers any more than a Donald Trump does not care about the workers. So when people talk about, oh my God, they're for the workers, they're bullshitting you. And you need to reassess. So when it comes to, this system here in Florida, of course, unions are far few and in between. Quote, today, Brightline workers began the path forward to protect and advance the economic security of their families. That's from John Samuelson. And says, we thank them for putting their trust in us. According to the Transport Workers Union, a majority of the lead attendants and onboard attendants for Brightline, Florida, who work on the Orlando-Miami line have signed cards in support of unionization submitted to the National Mediation Board this Thursday morning. The National Mediation Board is an independent agency of the federal government that manages labor relations within the railroad and airline industries. Brightline Florida workers, who Samuelson says began self-organizing in the last several months, are asking Brightline to honor their desire to unionize by granting voluntary recognition of their union. Doing so would allow them to begin the process of bargaining a union contract. If Brightline opts not to grant them the recognition, the union will move forward with an election process. Now, I'm going to say this. I hope that if Brightline decides to not honor them and forming a union, I hope that the Brightline workers organize and vote to strike. Swing for the fence. If you reach for the stars, you might get the moon. Look, Brightline, they're aiming to make as much money as possible because it's privately owned. So that means investors and the people at the top are going to try to make as much of a return as possible. And that means they're not going to want to pay you a livable wage. They're not going to want to give you the benefits that you truly deserve because that's going to be money out of their dividend checks. So if they're not willing to pay you what you should be paid, then guess what? Nobody gets paid. No, shut that shit down. I'm being real. Shut it down. Because the thing is that ultimately, you're the ones that actually make the Brightline run. Not these people who are at the top. I guarantee you, the people who are the owners of Brightline, they do not even know how to operate those trains. So without y'all, they can't do diddly squat. So I hope that, number one, you swing for the fence when it comes to your pay and benefits. Meaning, it just came out, the out of reach from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, that you have to make over $35 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the state of Florida. Orlando is now considered one of the highest priced areas. The area where I live in is now considered one of the highest priced areas to live in the state. Now, Miami is also considered one of the most highest priced areas in the state to live in. Meaning that if you're going to be living in either one of the hubs, Orlando or Miami, you need to be making a decent amount, a livable wage, in order to live in either one of these areas. Meaning you need to make at least $35 an hour. I said what I said. Meaning y'all need to be swinging for $45 an hour. Come at me in the chat. I don't care. I don't care. Because the thing is like, if you're going to be having these people working day in and day out to help transport people between Orlando and Miami, then guess what? They need to be making a living wage. You want quality workers? Pay them a living wage. Because ultimately, the issue is that you have all these people who are working, who are attendants on these trains, the train operators and all that, and they can't hardly make a living wage, which means they're going to have to get second jobs, and which means that I don't want my train attendant to be exhausted and tired. I don't want the person who's operating the train to be operating on fatigue or running on empty because they have to work all these multiple hours just to be able to afford to live. So no, pay them a living wage. See, this is one of the reasons why I always call for a full nationalization of things like Brightline. Because ultimately they need to be paid what they should be paid. And the thing is, like, no, start at $45 an hour. Start asking for that. Because you should be making what it costs to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Orlando. These people need to get the hell out of here. All right. It says the TWU is committed to a winning industry leading contracts that deliver wages, benefits, and quality of life improvements. So Samuelson is a Brooklyn native that worked for the New York Transit Authority. It says Brightline has an opportunity to recognize the democratic will of their workers and recognize the TWU on the property as a union and then working hand in hand to build Brightline, Florida. Now, I will say this. When people talk about democracy in the workplace, you get it in a very limited fashion through unions. This is why I say workers should own the establishments that they work for. Because if you collectively own it, then therefore that is even a stronger democratic say over how the workplace operates. You're not operating at a disadvantage, because the thing is that when you're operating as a union, now I'm not saying that I'm against unions. I am for unions. I say, but unions is the basement now. That's not even the first floor. That's the basement. I think that we should start going beyond unionization. I think unions is not adequate enough. I think we should start working towards worker ownership. And I'm not talking about owning a piece of the company through stocks. No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual worker ownership, where it is democratically owned and operated, meaning you collectively vote on how the business is operated, on who is in your management structure. And it is one person, one vote. None of this, oh, this many and that many shares. Nope, one person, one vote. And it's according to the will of the workers. And the issue is that a lot of times what these businesses will do is that they will co-opt the unions, and then some of the union bosses and the people like that will be in cahoots with the people at the top in the company, and they will undermine their workers. This is what's going on in TransDev that transports people through access links here in Orlando. The people that transport me to and from dialysis, yes, I'm gonna call them out, because the thing is like these drivers do not get what the adequate pay that they're supposed to get. They're starting them off at $15 an hour when I told you guys that you need to make at least $35 an hour in Orlando in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Is that adequate? No. TransDev, do better. But that's the problem. They don't want to do better because they need to get the money for the people at the top. They need those dividend checks. It's the same thing with Brightline. They want those dividend checks. They don't want to actually give it to the people who actually do all the work. Just like TransDev doesn't want to give the money to the actual drivers who do all the work. This is why I call for a ownership of the actual means of production, that's the company itself. And so this is why I say, and me and Roger Meadows will tell you, if he's still in the chat, that there needs to be, number one, a right of first refusal. And when it comes to these corporations and these companies, it needs to be offered to the workers. And people will be like, well, how can the workers actually afford to buy the company if they don't make enough? Look, you make it so that the federal government actually gives out a loan or a grant to the workers collectively. It could be a very low interest loan or it could be a grant. I favor just giving a grant because that means you don't have to pay it back. And then they buy the company collectively. And then once they have ownership of the company collectively, they can restructure it democratically and run it collectively as their own. Because once the workers start to own a company, they're not going to undermine themselves. They're not going to outsource their own jobs, and they're not going to undermine the company in a way that disadvantages them when it comes to the environment and when it comes to how the people around them are treated. Because they're going to see their other fellow workers. So, boy, y'all better swing for the fence. Says under Samuelson's leadership as union president, the TWU has won over more than 15,000 new members who have opted to join the union over 20 successful organizing drives, according to the union, which is also on a mission to defend jobs in the transit industry from automation and displacement. Worker ownership would actually prevent that. Says according to Samuelson, workers for Brightline, Florida first began organizing themselves before reaching out to the TWU after joining the union. Samuelson noted a high amount of enthusiasm among the rank and file, but added that workers at this time also still have concerns about the retaliation from Brightline. Even so, the union notes that they've had luck in talk with Brightline out west. Last year, TWU was one of 13 labor unions that reached the agreement with Brightline West, representing a notable commitment by Brightline to use highly skilled union labor to help build and maintain a major high-speed rail project connecting Las Vegas to Southern California. A 218-mile project is currently underway, funded in part by $3 billion in federal funds from the Biden administration's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Now, a better way to utilize those resources is to, instead of giving those billions of dollars to private companies in order to operate, is making it so that no, we're only going to give you that money if the company is a worker co-op, if it's employee owned. Like it just makes more sense, because now you're putting the power in the hands of the workers instead of in the hands of the small few, the corporate parasites. But that's what I would have done. I would have made a stipulation that it had to be employee owned. It says, meanwhile, Brightline, Florida, which runs a high-speed train line through Miami to Orlando, first began offering its own high-speed rail service last September. By the way, I'm going to be honest with you. They call it high-speed rail, but it ain't high-speed. If it takes me about 3 hours to get from Orlando to Miami just driving, then why in the hell does it take 3 hours, 3.5 hours to get from Orlando to Miami on Brightline? That's not high speed. I'm sorry, but it does not make any sense to call it high speed if I can get there in the same amount of time in a car. Don't make no sense. So stop calling it high speed rail when I can probably beat the train there in a Volkswagen Jetta. Jeez Louise, people, oh, it's high-speed rail. Bullshit. Anyway, it says the construction of Brightline Station in Orlando, which officially completed last June as part of a 4-year project, was constructed of the line involving about 10,000 employees. The company also plans to expand the system with future stops in Tampa, Cocoa, and Stewart on Florida's Treasure Coast. So it says the union, which represents workers for 4 major airlines like Southwest and Florida, shared that they recently secured a record wage increase for onboard workers at Amtrak, covering about 360 onboard workers along the Northeast Corridor. So the senior vice president of Brightline, Ben Porritt, says we enjoy a strong, open relationship with our Brightline team and recognize their right to explore representation. Our goal is to continue providing the best workplace experience for all teammates, allowing for career and individual growth. So, yeah, my hope is that the Brightline workers swing for the fence, like I said. Now, the thing is, it's like they got it. They can afford it. Hang on. Let me show you this. Because I was curious. I was like, how much is it for a ticket for me to go to Miami. So here's Brightline. So for a single person to go to Miami in a few days, the shortest amount that I found was $59 per guest. Here's one for $74, $69, $49, $34, $99. So it varies in price, right? Of course, you probably charge more towards peak times and things like that. But $54 to get to and from Miami. Wait, is that $59 each way, or is it round trip? Hang on. Now, it's $54, which means it's base price, no seats auto assigned, no modifications, no cancellation. Then $74 is complimentary seat selection, pay the fare allowance for modifications, cancel for 100% Brightline credit up to 30 minutes before departure. Then you get the premium, which jumps from $74 to $149, which is wild. Like, how are you guys going to charge double the price and you only get, it says extra perks, and it doesn't tell you what the perks are? What the hell? Let's just go down to the $54. So so now you have to pay another price to return. So let's say this. So then, in total, you're paying $113 to go to and from Miami, which to some people would be like, oh, that's not that bad. But it's cheaper to go in a car than it is to go through Brightline. Now, here's my question, because according to gas prices and the average, amount that a car holds in gas, you are going to be paying less to drive versus actually using Brightline. Now, here's my issue. If the speed of the train would justify the price, in my view. If I can get to Miami in an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, that would justify the price. But if it takes me 3 hours, 3.5 hours to get from Orlando to Miami, and it's the same amount of time that would take me to get Miami in a car, why in the hell would I choose to pay more to get on Brightline? But, well, you're not driving. Well, yeah, so what? That's the only convenience, is that you're not driving. You know what I'm saying? But it's still going to take the same amount of time. Like, it just doesn't really justify itself, in my view. Am I a cheap ass? I feel like it doesn't justify. Like, it literally, like, okay. Let me share this with y'all. Because I was like, how long would it take for me to get there? It doesn't make any sense. So, says, this is from Brightline. Says the ride between Orlando and West Palm Beach is approximately 2 hours, and 3 hours and 30 minutes between Orlando and Miami. Our current schedule between Central Florida and South Florida includes 16 daily round trips with hourly northbound and southbound departures, meaning it takes the same amount of time. So why in the world would I spend that much money when it's just cheaper to go by car? And if I don't have a car, most likely it's because I can't afford it. So why am I spending more for a train versus when I can get there in the car? Like, a plane ride is more justifiable in the price because you literally can go 1,000 miles in 2 hours. So the price actually is more justified because you're actually able to get there faster. But if you're giving me the same amount of time as it would take to get in the car, then why are you charging me more than it would for a car? It actually should be cheaper than riding a car. Anyway, with that being said, they're actually making decent money, right? Though, from what I'm hearing, the ridership is actually low, probably because it actually is more expensive than driving. But this is why I say it should be owned by the workers. Or technically, if I really want to show my communist side, I think Brightline should be state-owned. State-owned. And then the workers should, have their own union, and we should be able to vote on the workings of a state-owned high-speed rail system. Also, you should increase the speed that the train operates, because if that train is operating at 75, 80 miles an hour, that's not high speed. We need to start going China and Japan level speeds in those trains. And if people go, oh, it's not that safe, well, then we need to make it safe. We need to build up those tracks to make it more safe. Because if they can do it in China and Japan, we can do it here. Because if you're going to have high-speed rail, I'm going to expect to get to Miami in an hour and a half. I'm going to expect to get to Tampa in 45 minutes. They want to charge that much. The hell? But yes, I hope that the workers, I hope the workers really, pull out a good one on this. But in the way Florida treats its workers and the way Florida treats unions, they have an uphill battle. But if you can encourage the workers, solidarity with them, but ultimately, let's push for worker owned, not just unions. Unions, you can push for that, but that's not the end all be all. Push for worker owned. So yeah. Go ahead and give the video a like. Thank you very much. Oh my God, I just realized the time. I am very late. So gotta get going. But I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. Let me see. Now let's go into the chat. Just do a couple and then I can go away. Achikario says, Brightline, I thought it was going to be fast travel train. It's not. Yeah. So, let me see. Surfing to the Max says it's fairly fast, but not high speed rail. Yeah, exactly. Let me see. Sebastiano says I defer to party leadership. Oh my goodness. Ziggy says, James, does the business pay taxes? No, they pass the cost on to customers. Yep. They always do. You see. Sabotage says most businesses have subcontracted driving, making unionization hard and mostly unbeneficial to the driver. All right. So And yeah, Roger Meadows said the state-owned public bank to pay for it. That's another point. I honestly think that a CBI to push for that would also be beneficial, but there's some other like minor laws as well that are kind of convoluted that also will have to be pushed out the way. I got to get back together with Nelson Betancourt to talk about that, but I hope that we can get something like that going here. Let's go into, let me check on the Rockman. We are good there. I'm going to check to see if we have any Rumble rants. We have any Rumble rants? Looks like we're good on the Rumble rants. Okay. All right. So I'm going to head on out. But one thing I want to mention to you guys is, thank you very much to Lucas for becoming a YouTube member. Clap it up for you, Lucas. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Roger says, instead of having public sector unions negotiate with governor who is not their boss, boss is who pays you. Have them negotiate with us. Allow them to put their contract on ballot. Okay. I see. All right. Thank you very much. Now, I wanted to share this as well before I head out. We're still raising money for mutual aid here in Orlando. Yes, we just did a mutual aid event, but we're also still accepting donations for us to get grocery gift cards for our unhoused neighbors here in Orlando. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also help us out here in Orlando by going to Cash App at $Orlando RBN. We will be raising money for that so that we can do our next mutual aid action as soon as humanly possible. We did a mutual aid action last week. That was wildly successful. Thank you so very much to everybody who's donated so far to make that happen. If you guys would like to see that mutual aid action, I actually live streamed it last week as well. So if you guys want to see that, that was great. Shout out to Orlando RBN chapter for making that as successful as it was. So thank you very much to everybody there. Also, just to let you guys know, I know Sabby has a event coming up, as well as Nick. Nick has a mutual aid event coming up. Let me make sure I find it. So man, Nick tweets a lot. But Nick also has one. Let me see if I can find it. Should have put it up. I should have had it up earlier. My apologies, everybody. Let me see. Can't spell. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to make sure. Where is it? Okay. Perfect. All right. So let me share here so you guys can see as well. So here is Nick's mutual aid event. So it says he's running a mutual aid community event to give out school supplies to low-income families in Kansas City. He says, my goal is to raise $1,000. Any donations is greatly appreciated. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to Cash App at $Socialist MMA or Venmo at Revolutionary Blackout. So let me see. Socialist MMA. Make sure I put that there. Got it. So if you guys are on Cash App, you guys can just go to Cash App and then put in Socialist MMA. So you guys can help him out with that. He's also going to be giving out haircuts for kids for school. So that's also really important because you want the kids to, you know, have their confidence, you know, when they go to school. Trust me, I know. So that you guys have that there. Also, I would like to direct your attention to Sabby's, her mutual aid that she's doing. It's going to be, I think, next week. So this is, yes. So, and I will share this. So she has a back to school as well. And hers is also going to have a barbecue. So if you guys would like to, her goal is $2,000. So it's a back to school barbecue. It's going to be next Sunday, August 18th at 12 p.m. So if you're in the Boston area, you know, go ahead and help out if you can. So this is the details, and I'm going to place the link in there. It's through Spot Fund that Savvy is raising money for hers as well. So if you guys can, that's for Savvy Saps. Okay. So those are the mutual aid events that we have going on here to help out the people in the community. Thank you so very much to everybody for helping out. Actually, let me put this. I know Savvy does it this way, just so that everybody gets it easier. All right. Okay. I want to make sure I get that in. All right. So thank you very much for everybody. I will be getting into the readings on my channel. It is 3:40. I am way late, but like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found them. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary. I love you all for watching. Mwah! Forehead kisses to every single one of you. Bye bye.